Good morning. I am a great fan of the TEDx series of talks, and especially being here in Vancouver, it's a great privilege. So I'd like to thank the organizers for giving me this platform to speak to you about how we can get more involved in human rights, how we can be a voice for the voiceless, and also for allowing me to be able to share with you one of my dreams. But before I do, I'd like to share with you some of the concerns that I have in my homeland country, in the country of my birth, the human rights abuses that take place there. If you lived there, half of you, if not I would say most of you, would be dead. You'd be killed by execution, or at the very least, you would be imprisoned and tortured. Now, I don't want you to lift up your hand, but the questions I'm going to go through, I want you to think about it in your head and consider these things. Has anyone here written a blog against our government or against our leader? You could be imprisoned for life. Has anybody here converted from one religion to another? If you converted from Islam to another religion, you would be considered an apostate and be sentenced to death by hanging. Are there any homosexuals in this group? Death sentence for you. Anyone had sex outside of marriage? Don't lift up your hand. You would be charged with, quote unquote, acts incompatible with chastity and be given 100 lashes. Or if you were married and you committed adultery, you would be sentenced to death by stoning. You would literally be buried, wrapped in shrouds, while people took turns throwing stones at your head until you die. If you haven't guessed already, I am talking about the Islamic Republic of Iran. And the scenarios I've just given to you are part of the discriminatory, repressive rules under Sharia law, which is an Islamic-based law that Iran has interpreted for its own penal code. And it wasn't always like this. It's only mostly been in the last 30 years. Before, Iran was ruled by a monarchy. And under the monarch, under the Shah, people were fed up. They wanted freedom. They wanted democracy. They wanted better human rights. And there was an Islamic cleric by the name of Ayatollah Khomeini at the time who promised the people there that he would come to Iran, bring freedom to the people, and step aside from politics. But that's not what happened. He came, he stayed, and imposed a new era of tyrannical rule, grave human rights abuses. Literally, Iranian people's lives changed from one day to the next, and he spiraled the country back into the Middle Ages. Imagine our own Prime Minister one day telling the women in this group that we are forced to cover our heads because our hair is emitting sexual vibes. Sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Sounded ridiculous to Iranian women in Iran, but this is what was happening. My mom went from wearing the latest fashions off the Paris runways, including miniskirts, to literally the next day being forced to cover herself. And this is symbolic of the greater repression and discriminatory laws that were taking place on women in Iran. Iran is under a gender apartheid, and women's lives are literally valued as being half of a man. So let me give you an example. If you get into a car accident and you kill a man or you injure him, you have to pay twice as much in compensation money to him and his family, it's called blood money, than the amount you would have paid if you had injured or killed a woman. My father was also victim to these new rules under this regime, and he was, at the time, the general manager of a hotel. He was conducting business as usual, allowing alcohol, music, dancing, mingling between men and women. But under these new rules, because you have to remember at this time in 1979 when the revolution was happening, there was so much chaos, nobody knew what these new rules were. He was allowing these things And one day, the Revolutionary Guards stormed into the hotel, beat him up, threw him in the paddy wagon. Off he was to jail, where he was tortured, lashed some more, and they were going to give him the death sentence. They were going to execute him. And out of some fate of luck, which I could talk about more at another time, we managed to get him out temporarily. And at that time, he was on the first plane ride out of the country, and our rest of our family followed suit. When I was about 2 years old, we immigrated here to Canada. And I can say, living here in Canada, in such a free nation, I have never taken my freedoms and opportunities for granted. And this is what I wanted for my people back from my homeland. So when I heard in 2006 of a young girl, same name as me, who was in trouble, I thought there was something I had to do about it. Her name was Nazanin Fatehi. She was 17 years old when she was in a park with her 15-year-old niece. 3 men attacked them, tried to rape them, and out of self-defense, Nazanin pulled out a knife, stabbed one of the men. He later died in hospital, and as a result, she wasn't treated as a victim of attempted rape. She was tried as a first-rate criminal and sentenced to death by hanging. Now, I was blown away by the story. I was so upset and angry about the injustices of this case, and I recalled back in my days working as a global youth educator with the Red Cross, where we were teaching other students, if not now, then when? If not you, then who? So I said, okay, if not me, then who? So I decided to start an international campaign to save her life, and we started with a simple petition which grew. We managed to collect about 350,000 signatures on a petition, and this was the weight I needed to approach government leaders here in Canada, at the European Union, later at the United Nations, and get media attention to try to help her. And eventually there was so much pressure from individuals like you, that the head of judiciary in Iran was forced to grant a stay of execution for her and order a new trial. And in that new trial, she was exonerated of all murder charges and released from prison. Now, I've really shortened the story. A lot went on in her campaign. But I learned so much in that campaign, so much. And if I had to just shorten it to 3 points, 1, I learned that Nazanin Fatehi was not alone. There was 160 others, at least, juveniles waiting on death row in Iran. And that, again, somebody had to do something. So that's when a group of us started Stop Child Executions organization to try to put an end to executions of children. Number 2, I learned that nothing is impossible. Nothing, even reversing the decision by a ruthless, uncompromising regime like the Islamic Republic of Iran. And third, I learned about the power of the individual, the power that each and every one of us has inside to make a difference. I believe every one of us can change grand things, and that's mostly why I'm here today. I saw that just little old me was able to help instigate change that expanded out, and we were able to save a human life. So I want to encourage you to be the voices of the voiceless. I want you to stand up when you see an injustice taking place. Living in a democratic country like Canada, we have rights, but we also have responsibilities. Responsibilities to help those that are in need, those that are the most vulnerable, those that don't have a voice, whether it's children, animals, sometimes women. And it doesn't have to be abroad. It can be in our own backyards. It can be people being bullied in our schools, in our workplaces. It can be victims of those who are being abused for their race, their religion. discrimination that they experience, racism, xenophobia, whatever have you. And you can make a change in your own way, in your own unique way. If you're presented with a petition, sign it. You have nothing to lose. If those 350,000 people had the defeatist attitude for Nazanin Fatihi, I don't know where she'd be today. If you have a few spare minutes and you can write a letter to your local member of parliament about something that you're concerned of, it makes a difference. If you can join a rally, if you can volunteer your time, even 1 hour a year, it's something.